Right, in preparation for the June exams, it has been said that functions under trigonometry, they are included. That means you must revise grade 10 functions. Now, remember in grade 10, you did the graphs for y is equal to a cos bx plus q, y is equal to a sin bx plus q, and y is equal to a tan bx plus q. So for you, there are three variables here, a, b, and q, but for a question they will bring a maximum of 2 variables. They will not bring 3. So all what we need to know is the effect of a, the effect of b, and the effect of q. So the effect of a on these two, it will change the amplitude. So a affects amplitude. That is on the graph of y is equal to cos and y is equal to sine. It affects the amplitude. But on the graph of tan, you know, the graph of tan goes to negative infinity, goes to positive infinity, so it does not have an amplitude. And then b, on all the three, it affects the period. Remember, for this, for the graph of cosine, you have to divide 360 by b to get the new period, right? And then for this one, you are dividing also 360 by b to get the new period, and then this one, you'll be dividing 180 by b to get the new period. Because we are saying without any changes from the mother graph, the period is 360 for the graph of cosine, the graph of sine is 360, for the graph of tan is 180. So when you bring in the b, you divide by the b to get the new period. And then q, like in functions, it is the vertical shift, either up or down, depending whether q is positive or negative. Alright? So q is the vertical shift. Alright, so some of the things we'll also discuss them, but it's also important coming to the value of a. We have said it affects the amplitude, but then there's also a point that if a is less than 0, if a is negative, then it will cause the graph to be reflected along the x-axis. So from the normal graph, which we know the graph of sine x, or be the graph of y is equal to 2 sine x, if we put negative 2 there, the graph of y is equal to 2 sine x is reflected along the x-axis. So we need to know that a, as much as it affects the amplitude, it also, if it's negative, it causes a reflection along the x-axis. Alright, so let's look at 2018, paper 2, Department of Education. 5.1, consider f of x. F of x is equal to negative 3 tan x. 5.1.1, sketch on a grid provided in the answer book the graph of f for 0 degrees to 360 degrees inclusive. Clearly show all the intercepts and asymptotes. So looking at the graph of f of x, which is negative 3 tan x, if we check, the negative 3 is simply telling us that the graph of 3 times x has been reflected along the x-axis. Alright? And then the period of this graph has not changed. The period is still 180 degrees. So what we are simply going to do, it's very easy. You take your calculator, you press mode, you go to number 3, ways table, you put your function, which is f of x, that's -3, tan. To put x, you go for alpha, and then you go for the second bracket, the closing bracket, that's where we have x, and then you close, you press equal sign, it will give you g of x, you just press equal sign, it will say start. We are starting from 0 degrees, so you put 0, put equal sign, it will say end, you're ending at 360 degrees, and then you press equal sign, the step. If you check what they have given you on the answer book, the steps is 45 degrees, 45 degrees, so you put 45 degrees, and then it gives you a table. So at 0, it's 0. These are just the crucial points. 45 degrees is -3. At 90 degrees is an error, so that's an asymptote. At 135 degrees it's +3. 180 degrees is an error. 180 degrees it's 0. And then 225, it's -3. 270, it's an error, that's an asymptote. And then 315, it's +3. And then 360, it's 0. So we know our graph for tan. Usually it goes like this, but because of the negative, this has been reflected. That's why we have to, it's going to be like this. And then this was supposed to be going like this, so it's now going like this. And then this side it will be going like that. So basically that's our graph. And then, so if you are given the function, it should be very easy to draw the graph because you can get assisted from your calculator about the points. All what you need to have is the general knowledge of how the graph should look like. Okay, then hence or otherwise, write down the period of f. We've already talked about the period. The period is not going to change because our b is 1 day. So 5.1.2a period is still 108 degrees. Then b, the equation of h, the reflection of f about the x-axis. So 5.1.2 b, we know that h of x is a result of reflecting f of x along the x-axis. So the reflection along the x-axis is multiplying f of x by negative. So it's equal to negative f of x, which will be f of x is negative multiplying this by negative, that will give us 3 times x. That is our h of x. That's 5.1. 5.2, we are given a sketch of the graph of g of x. This is g, and they are saying g of x is equal to a cos b theta. Now, they have brought 2 variables in this question, and we have said you need the knowledge, pre-knowledge, to know what A is and what B is. We have said A, it affects the amplitude, it also temper with the reflection along the x-axis. So, if we check our graph, we know the graph of cos, that it is when theta is 0, it should be there, and then it comes down, and then it reaches a turning point, it goes up. That's basically how we understand if A is positive. But then, by mere looking, we can see that it has been reflected. That means our A is negative. And also, the amplitude has gone up to 2. That means our A basically is answering 5.2.1, the values of A and B. A is equal to negative 2. Then B, we are now checking on the period of the graph. The graph starts, and then it will start repeating here. Then we check the values of x. It's from 0 to 360 degrees. So the period has not changed. That means B is simply equal to 1. 5.2.2, use the graph to determine the value of values of x for which g of x is greater than 0. Now, when we say g of x is greater than 0, remember along the y-axis or along the g of x-axis, which is the y. Remember, g of x is the same as y. So, this is the x-axis becomes the boundary line which separates the negative values and the positive values of g of x. So when we say g of x is greater than 0, it means it is above this line, the x-axis. So the part of the graph that is above is this one. That means we are supposed to describe this part of the graph using the values of x, and we can see that it's from 90 to 270 degrees. So 5.2.2, we are saying g of x is above the x-axis for the values of x that are from 90 degrees to 270 degrees. So x is greater than 90 degrees but less than 270 degrees. Then 5.2.3, determine the range of h. If h is the image of g, if g is shifted down 2 units. Now, shifting g down 2 units will just focus on the minimum and the maximum, because that's what will give us the range. So 5.2.3, the minimum, if it's shifted down by 2 units, it will go down to -4. And then the maximum, which is a 2, if it's shifted down 2 units, it will come to 0. So our y will be greater than or equal to -4, but less or equal to 0. Alright, we may write this in other interval notation, like from -4 to 0. We use the square brackets because these are also part of the y values on the graph. And then the last question, determine using the graph the value of -2 into cos 0 plus cos 1 degree plus cos 2 degrees plus ... until you get to 360 degrees. So you can definitely use a calculator to add cos 0 plus cos 1 degree plus cos 2 degrees plus cos 3 until you get to 360 degrees. You will not finish. Otherwise, you will just give up and leave it. But it needs some mathematical reasoning. Now, to say, if you factor out the -2, it means you remain with cos theta. That is your g of x. Now, if we look at a graph of cos theta, we know the maximum is at 1. The graph is like this. The minimum is at -1. And then it goes, that is the graph of cos theta. Now, if we check, when theta is 0, it's 1. And then as we move towards 90, that is 1 degree, 2, 3, 4. And then after 90, we will have the same values, but they are negative. So it means these values, which are positive, will be eliminated by these values that will be negative until you get to x equal to 180. So it will be 1 minus 1. So these all have eliminated and it's 0. Now starting from here, from 181, we will be having values of y that are negative until you get to 0, and then we start positive values. And these positive values will eliminate these negative values until you get to 360. So the only value that will remain is cos 360 degrees, which is 1, because all these have been eliminated from here, from 181 to 359. So the only one that will remain is cos 360. So we are simply saying a negative cos 0 degrees plus cos 1 degree plus until you get to cos 360 degrees is simply equal to -2 by cos 360 degrees is 1. That's the only one that will remain. So this will give us -2. So 5.2.4, we are saying the answer is -2. All right, that's a part of the revision of grade 10. I hope we'll get time to look at another question. All right.